Hello and welcome back to another great and glorious lesson on quadratics. So first off, we're starting to ease ourselves into solving quadratic equations. So think of a question that has two possible correct answers. I'll give you an example. During one flight of the space shuttle, when is the shuttle exactly 1 kilometer from the ground? Well, if you think about it, if a space shuttle were to fly, and this would be the shuttle, so I guess you could even say a plane, and here's the ground, and if this were 1 kilometer up, and wouldn't this be 1 kilometer up? So there's actually two locations where the space shuttle or a plane or of that nature happens to be at 1 kilometer above the Earth. So what we're going to talk about is real simple things like solving quadratic equations in the form ax squared plus c. Something real simple. If you had something like 2x squared equals 16, well, how would you solve that? First thing I would do is I would divide both sides by 2, and then I get x squared equals 8, and so x is equal to plus and minus the square root of 8, or x equals plus or minus 2 radical 2. That's a more advanced example, but still nonetheless. Then the other thing we want to talk about is sometimes quadratic equations have two solutions, one solution, or no solution. It's just kind of through experience, but basically you're looking at, you could have a graph that bounces off the x-axis. You could have a graph that crosses the x-axis twice. And you could have a graph that does not touch the x-axis. Where it crosses the x-axis is how many solutions that the quadratic has. So we're going to get a little closer and a little deeper into that information really soon here. So let's just kind of have at it right now. How would you solve x squared equals 36? First thing I would do is I would take the square root of both sides. And when you take the square root of both sides, you have x equals plus and minus 6. So what that means is that essentially you have a parabola, x squared, you have a parabola that crosses in two spots. 6, 0 and negative 6, 0. How about this one? How about x squared equals 49? Well, in your head, you could probably think of x has two factors here. It's plus and minus, or it's perfect squares. So it's x is plus and minus 7. Those are the solutions that we have. The question for you is, are they quadratic equations? Let's go to a little more sophisticated examples. What if I had something like, how about 2x squared minus 98 equals 0? For that, the first thing I would do is I would add 98 to both sides. And then you could probably divide by 2. So now you have x squared is equal to, what's half of 98? And if you don't have your calculator, you can go ahead and do this. So what is that? 4 times 2, that's 8. 1, 8. So is that 49? So x squared is equal to 49. And then you take the square root of both sides. So in our case, x is equal to plus and minus 7. Maybe a couple more might help out. How about if you did something like x squared minus 7 equals 0? Well, here what you're going to do is add 7 to both sides. So now you have x squared equals 7. So what I would do next is take the square root of both sides. So x is equal to plus and minus radical 7. Now we could get the decimal approximation for that, but we won't have to worry too much about that. We don't really need it this time. How about one like x squared minus 121 equals 0? First thing you're going to do is add 121 to both sides. So now you have x squared equals 121. And then what I would do is square root both sides. So x is equal to plus and minus 11. Let's try one more challenge. Let's try a couple more. How about negative 2x squared plus 18 equals 0? Here you're going to subtract 18. And so now you have negative 2x squared equals negative 18. How about divide by negative 2? So now x squared is equal to 9. Square root both sides. So x is now plus and minus 3. And here is your last example for this. How about 9x squared plus 80 equals negative 1? First thing you should do is subtract 80 from both sides. So now you have negative 9x squared equals negative 81. Divide by negative 9, divide by negative 9. X squared is equal to 9. Square root both sides. X is now plus and minus 3. So this, I'm gonna pause right here and actually split this video up into 2 parts. This is real simple, and then in the next video I'm going to show you about how you can look at it and think of the number of solutions that you're going to have. So I'll see you soon. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and may the force be with you.